Hello and welcome back everybody to a next development session. So we're gonna start actual developing some codes after the introduction from yesterday. And the first thing I want to do is I want to rectify this whole create user, and I want to show you the whole process of well, of course, we're gonna do it in a test-driven development approach because that's how I always work. But immediately it already raises some question. As in like which method we're going to do, how we're going to actually do it. So email used this. Wrong. I'm in the wrong piece of code. I should be in the service test. Here. Yes, we already prepared it yesterday. Okay. And so just for your information, so yesterday the problem was I didn't have any extensions enabled basically. So now I enabled them. I had my JDK set up, so everything is properly correct now. So email already used, that means that this in the end should throw in exception. And I'm thinking, let me check, did I already create some exceptions? No. Okay, so exceptions. I'm gonna do singular, I guess. In here I've also done singular, but here it makes sense because this is user, this is a user controller. I'm always a bit like, what should I do? What should I do? And I guess then you can take inspiration from the other the people who went before you. For instance, the null pointer exception. That's of course Java lang. There is no such thing as a Java exceptions part. But here you have, for instance, you have assertions. That's plural. API assertions. But then again, this is a class. So it makes sense that you would do that. What else do you have? Yeah, you have util, you have stereotype. I'm gonna leave it at exception. If I ever have to change it, then it's gonna be a painful refactor. Well, painful as in like I will do a pull request which has many changes, but that's okay. Okay, so an exception. And now the question is, what do you want to do? What kind of exception do you actually want? Saying the email already used. Do we just want to do a generic bad request? Technically, it is a bad request because the email is already used. Do we want to say more more like an illegal, an invalid thing? And the thing, and this is an important thing, is that's like maybe a bit tricky, where I always want to separate the different types of errors or exceptions. In this case, this is a logic error, an application error, of course, everything's an application error, but as in like, oh, I made a mistake in programming, I've used this in the wrong way. The user can't fix this, so I'm fine with saying a no pointer exception. Then you also have like, if I use the validate from Apache, validate dot validate dot, okay. For instance, if you would say non-blank, and this would throw a illegal state exception, I think. I can't go into it. And then you have something with, no, that's invalid illegal parameter. Oh, what is it again? It's true that it as well. This throws a illegal argument exception. So this is an illegal argument exception, and then you have one more that's actually, and so that's also an would be like a programming logic and whatever, like, oh, user, it's not your fault, sorry, this can happen, or well, this is our fault. And but then you also have like a state, valid state, and this throws an illegal state exception. Again, that I also feel like is something application error wrong, because it shouldn't end up in an invalid state, or an illegal state. Same for the arguments, shouldn't happen. Something should have called it before that, which makes it a bit tricky, because if you go check the login, user login, well, you have all of this validation here on the login, which is there to make sure my application stays correct. So this will throw exceptions saying like, oh, something in your application was wrong because you tried to create a user login with invalid data. That is not allowed. But of course, trying to create a user with an email address that's already taken, that's not something the user can know. Well, maybe you should know if you already registered or not with that email address. Well, so that's not something the user can know, it's not something a single object can know. This is not a programming logic, this is really the user giving the wrong email address or whatever. So that's why I want to always create like specific exceptions for it. And then in that case, I don't mind saying like, oh, this is a bad request exception. If I connect with like a third party, I typically would have like a third party exception saying like, okay, something went wrong on somebody else's side. I am not the type of person to create like very specific types of exceptions. I've seen people who, like, if they integrate with a third party called foo, they would create like a foo exception. This is an exception caused by or is related to this to this system. But then I'm thinking like, why would you ever care? I mean, I understand you care that something went wrong with the other third-party system, or specifically with that one, but you know where the logic happens. You know where you call that third party. You know where the exception can be thrown, so you know you can handle that logic there. If you're really interested in like knowing that it was that specific system, then I assume you care about that at the point where you call your third party. So for instance, here we could say like, I could throw like an illegal or invalid email exception. First of all, it wouldn't be an invalid email exception, but it's because, yeah, the email itself would be thingy. But so in here you could create like, oh yeah, this is actually an invalid, this is an email already taken exception. But I don't see the point of it. The only thing that I can think of is that indeed you say like an invalid request, that like whatever you requested is not correct, but or an illegal request. But I feel like invalid is so, that seems to me more like, oh yeah, something is missing from your request. No, there's nothing missing from your request. It's just bad. So that's why I typically do a like bad request exception. And then here in my exception handler, I will add an exception for that, which is also why you see, for instance, here not found exceptions already kind of pre-populated. The conflict and operation not allowed exception, those are, I think, exceptions from Spring itself. Same here as like method argument not valid exception. I think those are all for the controller class. Well, all of these are, of course, for the controller classes because they are. That's how the exception handler works. They only operate at the controller level. So yeah, but so the thing is, like, I want to be able to map here, saying like, oh, if I have a null pointer exception somewhere, then it's a 500 server error. If it is a illegal state or an illegal argument, that's all 500, 500, 500, 500. But so if I say like, oh, bad request, well, that's a 400. So that's why even in my service, my service, who may not be aware of how data got in here, has to tell me or has to tell the caller, this was your fault, or oh, like, of course it was your fault, but it has to be able to tell you what kind of fault it was. As in, like, is it like a straight up, like, no, this is completely wrong, or like, yes, no, this value is not data, try again with some other data. And again, here from a caller's point of view, the caller probably can't know what email address is valid or not, as well as like it can change. I think that's the most important part. If I think there are two things. One, if you can tell based on signature that certain data is going to be invalid, then it's like, okay, this is really, really stupid. You should have known better, or whatever. And then I throw a really big exception because part of my signature says you can't do this. For instance, here I clearly say you can't do user login. You should know this should not be null. This is not allowed. That's application logic. Like, you have to check for it. But saying like, yeah, well, the email address you are passing me should not have already been used. Yeah, then you leave your caller with the whole question like, okay, but how do I know whether a password's already used or not? You can't, unless of course you provide a method saying like, is password already used and blah blah blah, and then you could assume. Nah, doesn't really matter too much. So I am going to create a bad request exception. I always extend from runtime exceptions because I don't want to force people to catch all these exceptions, because most of the time we don't really do anything with it. So yeah, here we say this should now throw a bad request exception. As you can see, I'm not the first one to think that bad request exception is a good name for an exception. But of course, I want to use mine. Now, this in itself will not be enough, since now I just say like, okay, how the hell can this ever throw a bad request exception? First of all, I don't throw it, and second of all, like, there is no logic to actually check on the password, and so this shouldn't throw a bad request exception. It's only if and this is a bit the question. Function of, again, test objects come in rather nicely, because one of the things I also didn't mention yesterday is that I can easily swap my objects if I say like, okay, well, I don't like this user anymore, I want to use a different user, or if I want to say like, well, actually, I don't want to just run this with one user, I want to run this with all my users. And then I can easily make this into a parameterized test, and I can say like, well, like the test users I want to test are these ones, which is a list, or I can say like, if I have here a test user, I can just say test user of values. I could say that's because I created an enum out of it. I can say values, and then I have an array. If I convert that to a stream, it's an easy way, or I could even say test user dot all or something, or test stream or something, and I put the test stuff in there because it's a test related object anyway, so that'd be fine. So the question, the bigger question we have to say now is like, do we say we're going to implement a user storage service that's find by email, or are we going to have a user storage service gateway? Actually, I should rename it. That has a method like exists by email or with email. Which is the two we're going to do. A find by email. The question here is more like, okay, an exists with email is really only going to be useful if you want to create it. Even for the login, it's not going to be useful at all. When else are you really going to try to find a user by email? I think typically you'll probably want to find by email by ID, and email should actually be more informative. If you want to log in, maybe if you want to reset. But then again, if you want to reset your password, then the only thing you're actually interested in it is like, does an account exist with that email? If no such account exists, you don't send an email. If it does, then well, you do send an email. So I don't think we really need a find by email. I think it is sufficient to know whether there exists one. And I actually have to look at the Spring query language exists. There are query methods that you can use for exists. GPA named queries. No, that's not it. Here, distinct and or is equal between less. Okay, but I want to know the starting word. Typically a lot of find, but I want to know exists. There is somewhere a paging and sorting limited. Because a boolean should be enough actually. Okay, then it's Spring named query, not a query language. Query methods. Query methods, it's even different. Named queries are the at named query. I know there is a way to do it. I'm pretty sure I have done it in the past. Yeah, it just exists. So they can see. Well, he wrote his own query as well. I'm gonna just write, and that's a nice thing. You can just, and then I would say by email. So this is the alternative approach. And then you say here, then return true. So in this case, I am gonna go for this one. Note that, and actually, I guess in this case, it's not gonna matter too much because since we didn't, so typically what you want to do then is you want to, in your success, also say false. And since I only have one case, I'm gonna really hard code it here. Sometimes, or what you could do also is like have that mocked setup in your before each. The problem is that if you use strict mocking, it would give an exception in the login null because it actually doesn't reach it. But yeah, in this case, actually, it wouldn't matter too much because this would by default return false. Okay, so we have not really solved our case. We have actually only made it worse. In what sense? Well, because now we are using the storage service, a method that doesn't exist. So then why? Then we go to the storage service. Again here. First, write your test. Exists by email with a capital E. Actually, I think my GitHub. Oh yeah, my GitHub Copilot is not connected at the moment, so I will connect that later. I was already thinking, like, I don't get any preview, I don't get anything anymore. It's a bit odd. And here as well, I first have my success case. Well, actually, there's only two cases: exists and not exists. Exists does not exist. Yeah. Does not exist is a bit stupid name, I feel. Does not exist too long. So I want to say like found and not found. It's a bit weird, but okay. So here we say user. I just call it service dot, and then we say exists by email. Do I have test user on the highest level? No, I don't have test user on the highest level. That's wrong. Well, not that wrong, but and then here I can just say user. And then normally this should be the only reference to test user. Yes. And all my other tests I can just say user dot get email. What I also typically do is you could say assert that, but in this case I feel like this is already like quite a lot of going on. You do a method call with a little argument and whatever, and like so I assign it typically to like a first variable, and then I say assert that the result is true. I could also have done like an assert that and the entire thingy is true. And sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. You know how it goes, right? Actually, maybe in this case, since there's only one assert, I actually might go for that one. But of course, this will also not all. And then I can say exact same, it is false. And so technically, this is enough because the test fails. Well, in this case, the test also fails, but it fails for a different reason. But so here you say the test fails. So I'm gonna and you can already see like using too much string emails is not a good idea. And so now I can say return true. And so now one of them will work, the other one will not work. Technically, I guess I should only have written this one where it says true, and then the next one which says false. What I sometimes also do is like I put them in comments, all the different cases I want to test, so I can do them one by one. This is also something I don't necessarily always do that strictly, as in like, oh, I first have to write my method before I even write the have to write my test before I write my method. Typically, I could like easily write a method that just returns nonsense and then write my tests. I'm not too upset by it. But so this will definitely have to refactor as well. Oh, and that reminds me, then of course, since we have an argument, I can also say a null. And that's immediately a test that will also fail. But also a test we can easily make work out of. So as a, just to show you, now we'll have this test passing, this test failing, this test. Okay, this is still working. Okay. Apparently we have to update something with Mockito. It's interesting how it says will no longer work with the future version of JDK. That's like I'm on like 25 right now. Anyway, so that's something I will look into as well. So you have one failing test, one passing test. So technically now you would have to fix it. You can't fix it because it's exactly the same test. It's a bit ridiculous. But I'm gonna first write this one. Throws. Oh, what the hell is going on? I'm not really used to my keyboard shortcuts, I guess. I don't know what my formatting is. I think it's Control Shift I. I have used the Windows keyboard shortcuts for a long time because I used to work on both systems, and then it was confusing to remember both of them. So the Windows keyboard shortcuts are still kind of in my head. And then professionally, I'm working with IntelliJ, which are different keyboard shortcuts. Professionally, I'm also working on a Mac, which again has different keyboard shortcuts. So my memory is a bit messed up. So now, if you run this test, it will also fail because it just returns true, of course. But that's easy to do. And the thing is, sometimes your test might even throw the correct exception without you doing the validation in front. Is that a problem? Yes, no, not necessarily. For instance, here, since I say like, oh, require non-null, but this would throw a null pointer exception. If I remove this, yeah, this line would throw a null pointer exception. So your test would still pass. And in this case, you wouldn't even have any other way to actually check it because you can't say like, oh, I expect no no interaction of my objects, not any of my mocks and nothing. Well, this is literally the first line. Before it even can call this method, it has to call this method, which will throw the null pointer exception. So in this case, if you do black box texting, you would say like, oh, I don't even need this line to actually pass my test. So as a minimalist, you could say like, I don't need this line, it will be fine. But this line is more here to make it clearer to me in the future that like, oh yeah, you should not pass in null. And in a method like this, a small bit like this, it might not be necessary. But like, it's a very explicit statement. And who knows, this might change in the future. Did I first do something else before I actually use this object, and then I'm doing something very heavy, something very complex maybe. And then also I say, like, oh yeah, but actually my login was null and I would throw an open to exception. It's like, oh yeah, that's a bit stupid. Now I've done something which I should not have done, or I could have avoided doing. So it's more for clarity, it's more for readability, it's more for really staying like, these are my conditions. And so now this one will pass, of course. Okay, so let's start on making this test green. So what does that mean? Well, the problem is that this actually now kind of means that we have to go to the user repository and we have to implement a method there, like this by email. And then we just say return. The problem is now that both of my tests will fail because this method doesn't exist. So we pass on to the next one. User repository. And then we say here, go to test. I should learn that. Is there a shortcut for it? There is no shortcut. I should put a shortcut on it. My repository also, I didn't do any of the GPA repository, current list repository, any of that. I went for a plain repository. Why is that? Because I will write a lot of my own queries. I'm basic like that, I guess. No, also I want to have more control over the actual queries, and well, not for the user, I guess. For the user, I could have gone for the regular ones, but I really want to limit like which methods you can use. If I would say, this actually becomes a CRUD list, or a list CRUD, was it? List CRUD repository, then you have a lot of methods all of a sudden that are available on this object. Yeah, it also means you have to test all of them. For instance, now if I say here, user repository, well, what do you have? Oh, you have a count, you have a delete, you have a delete all. You have all of these methods, and I'm like, I don't need a delete all. I don't need to delete all with iterable, delete all by ID, delete by ID. Well, delete by ID might need it. We'll have to see. Delete by ID, like find all, like, I mean, like, what? I don't need all of these methods. So that's why I'm saying, like, no, I will just do it myself. And if at some point I feel like, okay, well, actually there is a certain set that I want, then I can do it. But then again, I won't mind. I mean, like if you say delete all and you delete all, then just try it yourself. Just look at how the interface looks like, and you can do it. Yeah, okay. Well, and so this is the tricky part, of course, because now I would say like, well, actually, I'm gonna write the method first this time. The problem is that because of the way it works, now I've immediately implemented the entire method. So yeah. So this is technically not good because now it should completely work even without any implementation. But that's a bit special about the whole repository, I guess. Found, not found. And then here, did I do that on my save as well? What happens if I do a... Nope, there's another test missing here. What happens if I pass in an email that is null? And honestly, I don't know. This is by email, and then I don't have a test user here. Have I used test user? I've used test user there. Okay, so I'm always using the exact same one, the Eduardo. Not sure why. Users all capital. I could convert this into a parameter. I say like this email address should exist, like CSV source, but I find in this case it's definitely much clearer to just do it like this. Where is this email actually used? Email duplicate. Okay, so this is user. This is known. It's only used in one spot here. So technically, I actually probably want to bring this down. This is also very nice because now I can really localize my thing a bit more. Because here I use my generics. Yes, there is no, you see there's an email null, there's no password null because a null password will be allowed. That's like if you do an account that has logging into a third-party service, single sign-on stuff. Like, yeah, you go through google.com, that area, you actually log in, and then you come back to me. If I will add that feature at some point. In that case, I am not aware of your password or any password at all. In that case, a null password is to be allowed. So what are we doing here? Found, not found. So of course here this cannot be user gets email. I will just hardcode this as a user at test.com. User at test. I am. Oh, my screen. What the hell did I do? I went full screen and I'm back. And apparently OBS does not like it. This is false. The only thing here with this email is a bit tricky because if I ever use it, then I'm a bit messed up. This is also very interesting. He does not. This should be 80 characters. This line, and yet it seems to be not. Also, one of the things that I find annoying is that tabs really count as 4 spaces. I would really prefer tabs to count only as 1, because only 1 character. I understand that makes it a bit more difficult for the line visualization, but hey. Okay, so this is literally 80. The reason why it's not there is because of this inline email. So, I mean, like, here again, yes, it's convenient that it's there, but I might just disable it for this project, for this workspace, because I don't think it's going to add enough information. You would think that exists by email, it's an email, clear enough by itself. And here as well, entity class, like what the hell? Like, yeah, no, I'm fine. Email null. Yeah, I know this should be the email, will be the email. I mean, well, here it might be useful. The problem is that now indeed my line is over 80 characters long, which I don't want. My formatter doesn't kick in because this is technically not part of your assert that. I'm not sure what happened. No code completion anymore. Now I have code completion. Okay, so let's see whether this works. In the meantime, I can say I assume this will throw an exception. It's also weird I call this user repository and the other ones I call this repository. I'm just service, I mean. Okay, I cannot, yeah, test. Because here user service, I said, oh yeah, this is just, nope, I also did user service. Then where was it? User storage service? Here I just call it service. Here I call it user service, and yes. And technically even my user storage service should become the gateway. But I think I am gonna actually just shorten it. Service, maybe not, because if you start using other services, I don't think this will really be a null points exception. But I am curious to know what kind of exception it will throw. Okay, so apparently if you pass null, it is by email null, then it will just be false. No exception, nothing. Which is a bit... Well, it does make sense because you're looking for an email is null, I guess. And in this case, it's false. I think if I add here one with a null email, which is ridiculous because I can't do that because my database clearly says that email is unique, should not be null, which you can see somewhere here, resources. Email text not null unique. We should put an index on there as well, but I think because I say it's unique, there might already be a unique index on it. So that should suffice then. This one, what did this one do? Apparently it's an invalid data access API usage. That it does invalid data access API usage exception. So that's taken care of. One last thing that you could test in here is to check for SQL injection, if you really want to do that. If you assume that the query will be something like select or count or select select, yeah, and that might be like select one whatever blah blah blah, blah from, since it's a boolean, I'm not sure how you're gonna do SQL injection, but from users where email equals, and then email, if you expect something like this, then if you fill in here like the value, how do you do it again, and or true or email. I think if you do something like this, then you probably can do some SQL injection where your user always exists. You can also, I think the more advanced trick is to do something like this and just write your own next query. And then you say drop database. So that's something you could want to do and try to inject, because since this is an email injected by a user, and we'll look into that more in the next session. I will prepare it a bit, and then because I know I've done it before, I know Spring is safe. Even if you write your own queries, Spring will be safe, should be safe. So yeah, but still might be something useful to actually do on your test. So maybe I will say to do SQL injection test. Okay. So now we have written our repository test. So you can close the repository. We can go up one level. We can go to the storage service, which I am already going to rename to storage gateway. And then here, of course, this is user storage gateway test. This is, maybe in this case I am okay with just calling it gateway, because a gateway should never really have access to anything besides its own repository, if you think about it. Yeah. So I mean, technically you could even call this repository, because it should only ever, I assume it will only have, well, I guess you could do more fancy stuff in your gateway to make more advanced business domain objects. Anyway, so exist by email should now also work. Apparently these ones have not run all of them. Okay, let's try. Yes, no, okay. So we come back to where we were. Exists by email. Aha, and that's what I'm saying. Like, so now does it work? Well, yes and no, it works, but we didn't mock anything, and the default is false, and that's where defaults from mocks can be very confusing. Then return true. And so now, if you look at this test, you might think like, wow, but in this case, there isn't really much use case anymore for having two separate tests because they basically the same. You say true is true, false is false. Why not say an add boolean at value source and just say here booleans true false. I know boolean exists and it becomes an add parameterized test, and then here you say exists. The only thing is then you can't say is true or is false, but then is equal to exists. So it's a bit less clear. I'm gonna find out string email because my line is a bit too long and I think I can make it shorter and then it might fit on one line better. So now I don't need a not found anymore because that's the exact same thing. Here this would be more difficult in my user repository test. That would, and you might think like, why didn't you do it in the user repository test? Well, because in here it's more difficult. You have found and not found, but here you have to do the email address. That's different, and so you would have to pass in two values, both the email address and the expected case. Whereas in the storage gateway actually doesn't really care too much about it anymore. In this case, it's just a simple pass-through. So yeah, and then you can do like this, and then so this works now as well completely, and then we can go on to the service. The service test. Update user, yeah, let's leave like that. User service test. Why can this not be resolved too? Everything was renamed correctly. Okay, but sometimes it is a bit weird. So my user services in here, of course, my user service won't expose like an, oh, does this user exist method? No, he will only use it in the create user, which we've already added. So if I run my tests, this will fail. Yes, email already used. It's interesting that this doesn't say anything about unnecessary stubbing. Because I did do a stub on a mock. Might have to look into that. Because I definitely want to enable the strict stubbing, strict mocking. Anyway, so we are here, exists by email. That's what we have to use now. You have the user storage gateway. So I guess here also have to rename it. There might be more places. User storage gateway dot exists by email. Let me see. If user exists, throw new that request exception. For the time being, I'm not going to put any messages in there because there is I have no validation yet and I have no actual information yet. But what you probably want to do is you want to make sure that you add like fields and whatever and all the information on there that then can be used in like a message that then later on can be used in your handling, where it's just like, oh, this went wrong, and then with a message. Not the user is really going to see it. So I mean, like for something like that, I still have to find or like try to find a more user-friendly and a useful way. Okay, so now in this case, all tests should pass because we just added the XS check. So this will pass because this one returns false. This one will pass because now it returns true and then it throws the exception. And this one, of course, doesn't care about any of it. So to make an extra thing, you could even say like verify no interactions with the user storage gateway. In this case as well, again, it wouldn't really have mattered because the first thing it would do is to get the email, and if this was null, then it would throw no pointer exception anyway. So, but so this is something you can do. Say like, if you really care about it, you say like, oh, if the login is null, well, then I don't want any interaction with your storage gateway. Oh, yeah. Where do I sometimes do that? In the gateway, that might, for instance, be useful if you have the safe create user storage gateway. Where's my create user? Yeah, the create user does it unconditionally, of course. So I guess in this case it might be, well, not only create, I guess. Well, maybe it might be useful. But on an update, it might be way more interesting. In an update, for instance, if something is wrong with the object, you want to make sure you didn't actually call an update or a save or anything, because you don't want to save partial data, you don't want to save invalid data. So you just want to make sure you didn't do any data. Why do I user login not? This is stupid. I can just say user.get email. Is that shorter? Nope. Oh well. User login. Yes, I will do it like this. Oh no, I will do user login. Although typically I don't like to do stuff like this. For a simple reason, because I don't know if they're not final. I should make them final. There are no setters, so I should make them final. So why don't I like doing this? Because, well, I pass this user login already here. What if he changes the email address? Then I have no control over which email address actually is being used. So that's why I like to use data that I know won't change. In this case, user login will not change. User info might change, but that's okay because it's only used as a return and to check. So I never pass it into my unit under test. But here, of course, I do create, for instance, if I say create user login, if you would here then say like, oh yeah, user login dot set email, which of course I can't do now, but blah 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 blah, then this method does not do what you think it will do, but your access by email will still work. The create user on user login will still work as well, and it will just contain user info. And actually in here you won't even any check on which objects you actually do. In here all I say is like, oh, it should be the same object, which can be very dangerous. As I said, if the object can be altered, then this is not sufficient. Then this is indeed not sufficient. Then I might want to do an equals on the object on the login, and then I want to just say user.login again. And then they do an equals like that. But in this case, it's fine because I don't modify the object at any point, and I can't even modify the object. But that's going to be an interesting case for my user info, which I don't think I have already written any tests for. I don't think I have only used anywhere. Of course, it's being used now almost everywhere. My user service, I think we only have a create. Yeah, okay, so my... I don't understand why I think my cache is getting a bit weird. But so I've only created a user, I've not updated any user, but for the update of the user, that might be an interesting thing actually. And now here is also getting confused. cannot be resolved to type. I'm pretty sure it can. This actually is indeed a bit of an interesting thing, because you pass in the object, then he might change the object, and then you pass it on. Which makes me indeed think, like, is there a point even in having it? I'm also thinking how the update is going to be, because the update will take in the new object. But for my update, I might go back to actions. Well, I might do a full update on, like, okay, completely override all the user info. And then I just pass it on to the next object again, of course. No, because my user info, my update won't contain, no, my update will contain the ID. So what is the point actually, except for some logic validation that I put here? What is my gateway doing? Well, my gateway does a conversion between DAO and BDO. Okay, I'm just pondering upon things, whether they are those possible execution environment. No, it's true, because I have Java 25 now, but that's okay. I'm just wondering, because this now opens my eyes, saying like, yeah, well, this actually doesn't make much sense now, does it? So maybe I should put an arg that request here as well, and then verify the object as well. And just to show you equality, for instance, if I will do user.login here, it will use the equals of the object, and since there is no equals, it will do object comparison. This will create a new object, so indeed it fails. If then, however, if I go to user login and I say, well, I want an equals and hash code, and then all of a sudden this would work again. But so I'm not going to do that, because the next step, I'm going to leave my to-do to be. But the next step here actually is, I don't like this. I don't even have gen tests for my user login. Do I need test my user login? I guess I kind of do, because it does validation. The only thing, of course, I have here currently is a constructor. So we have a success, we have a email null, password null, and that's it. The other checks I'm gonna pull out later. So here I just say new user login, and then for instance here as well I can say private static final test user equals test user also. In this case, it really doesn't matter who I use, so I'm so used to having autocomplete, I typically use AI for more advanced autocomplete. So then now I would expect it to create the assert that blocks for me, which is a bit interesting. Also, technically, no, because indeed the user login will always be email password. The whole thing I said with single sign-on without password, then you wouldn't use this object. So the user login requires email and password. And if not, I can always still change it in the future. Set the tone by no user login, no user. Again, not strictly following the whole test-driven. Ah, yeah, okay, so it's complaining about the fact that email and passwords can actually cause no pointer exceptions. Yeah, we'll fix that in a minute. Okay, so all pass, that's good. The other checks I'm not going to do because I'm going to pull them out anyway. Voila. So all things gone. And so now in common, control the exception, I would do a new folder. How should I call this? Common objects, it's a bit weird. Common domain. Maybe we'll call it just domain for now. Do I want to create a record class out of email or not? Probably, yes. Okay, and so that's all that I would technically do, except that of course I want to have, the whole reason why I do this is because I want to do all my validation here. There was a no, start with an explicit invocation to a constructor. There were wait. Record class constructor. There were very compact ways to write constructors like this. Okay, so it's public email like this, and then this is not needed, it will do it by itself. Voila, that's how it was. I knew there was a way to do it. Okay, this way. So, and now, of course, again, you would have to write a test for it. Oh, that's why I don't like. I mean, this is not the reference I want. I want to generate a test for this. Source action, generate test. And so actually this is not completely correct yet, because I probably want to do lowercasing on this, but that will be for another time, and we'll probably start with that one as well. Lowercase, but then we have to check Unicode, non-Unicode, I mean, all those kind of things, equals and hash code. I probably want to test so many things you want to test on like this email object. And the nice thing is that then you can say like, oh, well, this actually becomes email, obviously. And then here, indeed, you only have to do the node check. And you know, every place where you use the email, it will be a valid email. The value will not be blank. It will not be null. It will always be lowercase if you say get value, because that's probably what I want to do. I want to do super value to lowercase or something. Then I have to look it up exactly how to do that. But I think there is a way to do that. Is this, I think. Flexible bodies. Ah, yes. That's very nice to have that feature as well. The problem is it is a compact constructor, must not contain explicit constructor. So this is a compact constructor, which is nice for regular validation if you don't want to modify the actual value that comes in. In this case, I want, so I probably just want to override the whole constructor, the blank field value, and then I just say here this dot value equals value, except that's not true because I want to do lowercase. But so we've written quite a lot of logic without writing any tests. That's not a Steven development's way to do, but just to show you how this will work. And then next time we'll start by implementing some tests, or maybe I will do it off camera. I will have to see. I will definitely gonna look into the SQL injection as well a bit. So yeah, next week I'll give you an update on how far I've gotten by myself. Okay, bye.